Rick Grenell helped change all of that, and now he is moving on to new and even bigger challenges. Rick Grenell, what was that like for you to be kind of praised so publicly and effusively by the President of the United States, and you're sitting right there?
Well, first of all, let me say happy St. Patrick's Day. How great is it to be on a show called Greg Kelly's Show on St. Patrick's Day? Pretty amazing. How lucky am I? So happy St. Patrick's Day, Greg Kelly. You know, I've heard the president compliment and say some of those stories in the past, and he always makes me laugh. The thing that I just have to say about President Trump, for those who don't really get to know him, is that he's a very normal, funny guy. He loves to use humor, and I think it's one of the things that the media miss. It's what, you know, the detractors miss. They go crazy when he says something, and it's clearly a joke. He's a normal person, and he loves ambassadors who are really focused on representing America, not the other country. And so I did exactly what he wanted to do in Germany, and then he went on to promote me to D&I. And so, yeah, it's a great honor to do any of these jobs when the president calls. I'm old school. When the president calls and asks you to do something, whether you want to do it or not, I think you got to do it, especially for somebody like President Trump, who's been through the ringer, and he didn't need all this to change America. And I'm extremely grateful for somebody like the president to even step up and take these hits and take on Washington.
So, so what's next? We know Beltway chatter, and Beltway chatter is notoriously wrong and mean-spirited, and I mean, my goodness, it seems like a real snake pit down there. But you're leaving Kennedy Center. You're still the presidential envoy for special missions. What is next for you? How are you going to support President Trump going forward?
Look, again, I just do what the president asks. He asked me to do some work in Venezuela, and I stepped up and did the Kennedy Center. And so whenever he asks, and we talk pretty regularly. He'll ask my opinion about certain things, and we talk about, you know, options. The president fully knows what I'd like to do, and knows my strengths, and knows that, more importantly, I'm willing to do anything that he asks. And so we got a lot of time. There's no rush. You know, this is a man who has got a lot on his plate, and we all just want to support him as much as possible. I can tell you, somebody who's not from Washington, D.C., I don't like to be in Washington, D.C. I like to be in the rest of America. But it is a nasty place where people lie, and the media are completely useless. They repeat and recycle things from other people. There's not a lot of reporters that are doing individual real work, like exposing fraud in California, which is beginning to happen.
Yeah.
So I like to get out of this place. Anyone who knows politics or Washington, D.C. knows that your church and your friends and your family are all outside of Washington, D.C. You don't really need this place.
Wow, that's sad but true, I guess. Look, do you care to give us your take on this Joe Kent situation? Joe Kent was, well, I don't know. It seemed very self-serving to me, that statement. You know, I said earlier, when I left my job at the Food Basket, a grocery store, I worked there in high school, I gave them 2 weeks' notice. 2 weeks! And this guy said, I'm leaving today. And I found that, well, such an important job. It really is not courteous and not respectful.
Yeah, look, here's my attitude is that the president of the United States is the one that's raising the money and campaigning and literally exhausting themselves and sacrificing so much to go out and campaign to the American people. The American people select somebody. They look at the two candidates and they say, this is the better person to lead our country. And so all of the appointees need to realize it's not about them. It's not their policy. They need to shut up and salute. If you can't work for the President of the United States and his policies or her policies in the future, then what you have to do is get out of the way, because I don't have any patience for these people who don't like the policy or don't want to implement the policy. Well, then you shouldn't get paid by the federal government. I think every single person who works in the federal government should sign up to implement the president's policy. And that, if it's a Democrat or a Republican, you have to implement the policy. But we have too many people with big egos in Washington that somehow think they get to stop the policy, or I have an opinion that matters. President Trump is somebody who, in private, wants to hear everyone's opinion. He works to make sure there is a diverse opinion, that people talk it out, fight it out, argue it out in front of him, and then he makes a decision. And when you leave that room, everyone should go implement it. So I don't think that Joe Kent should be surprised at where the President of the United States was going. And, at some point, you get out of the way, or really, more importantly, you don't take the job unless you're going to implement the president's policies.
Listen to this, President Trump, on you and how you handled a situation involving leakers over at the Directorate of National Intelligence. Pretty wild. Take a look, everybody.
I put him in charge of a thing called intelligence, and something he didn't really want to do, but he did it, and he did it incredibly well. There were a lot of leakers. He found out the leakers. And when he didn't find out who the leaker was in a certain area, he fired everybody. And he went into one room where there was leaks coming out. These are long-term problems that these various places have had. And he said, who's the one that leaked this? And they wouldn't admit it, so he fired the whole room. And he did a good job.
Is that a true story, Rick Grenell? That's pretty effective way to handle a leaker, I suppose. Did you do that?
Yeah, look, I did do that, and the president is absolutely right, and I'm really strong on this issue. Not only are you responsible to implement the president's policy, but if you have a job that requires you to protect national security secrets and interests, you sign up for that, and we go through a big process to vet you and make sure that you are the right person and that you don't have any leverage over you from outside interests. If you are protecting national security and somehow leaking it, I'm sorry, I think that there should be huge consequences for that. And so we found that there was leaked information, and we did an investigation called the FBI in, and we found out exactly where it was coming from, because we have records and we have ways to figure it out through the digital and computer systems. And so I knew it had to be in one area that had access to it. And so when we went in and we said, is anyone going to admit to this, or do you know who did it? And when every single person said, no, it wasn't them, we also knew that a couple of people for sure would have access to who did it and would know. And so the protection game at that point was bad. And I think it spelled disaster for the future protection of national security. And so I just said, this entire room is fired.
Wow. Well, they were either leaking or covering up for the leaker. And Rick, I like the way you handled it and how you handle everything here. Presidential Envoy for Special Missions, continued success. Please stay in touch, and our regards to the president, okay?
Thank you, Greg. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you.
Information. Truth is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.